name is Mucha Mlingo. I am an emotional intelligence practitioner and coach. I am passionate about emotional intelligence and transforming the lives of Africans. I always say one heart and mind at a time. I believe emotional intelligence is a game-changing skill, and yeah, I'm passionate about helping people to understand what emotional intelligence is and how it can transform their lives. So that's me in a nutshell. My career journey is an interesting one. If you had told me 15, 20 years ago that I'd be doing what I do now, I probably would have laughed. I started off in the financial district in the UK. I worked for financial services companies. My last job before I left the UK and moved to Kenya was with a financial services company called Edward Jones in Canary Wharf. And in that organization, I worked in the training department, training our financial advisors and stockbrokers. And I thought I was fast track in a role in financial services. And I always imagined myself as someone who would end up in a corner office working at sea level. And then I moved to Kenya and my life changed. I moved to Kenya, and when I arrived here, tried to figure out where my space was. My husband was moved here with work, and we're not originally from Kenya. And so I looked around, looked at the marketplace, looked at the financial services industry, and I couldn't find my space. I couldn't find where I fit in. I always say that, God had to take moving me to open up my reality and help me to see what I was purposed to be. And so on a lark, a friend asked me to come into their organization and run a training program for them. And that's how my training journey as a consultant began. I facilitated a session and realized that I could actually do this for a living. And so I set up my own consultancy firm, PTS Africa. We've been in existence since 2010. And even within PTS, we have evolved over time. When I started, my background in financial services is in sales. So when I started, we ran sales training programs, and I worked with financial services companies, training their salespeople. And over time, we've evolved into an offering that's embedded on emotional intelligence. And that's a journey that came about because I read a book by Daniel Goleman that really opened my mind to this idea of emotional intelligence. And I came to an understanding that the difference between those who change the world and those who just get carried along is emotional intelligence. And I looked for ways to embed that into what we do. So now my organization provides 3 key people development solutions. We do emotional intelligence training, we do emotional intelligence coaching, and we do training and development that's rooted in emotional intelligence. Our focus being leadership, because we believe that we can help leaders to really transform how they lead and ultimately get the best out of their teams. I am a mentor. I'm a mentor because I've been mentored myself, and I recognize how critical that is in my journey, the journey I've taken. And so yes, I am a mentor, and I'm a mentor in so many different spheres. I'm a mentor in church. I mentor young people, young women in church settings. I am a mentor in my work. I regularly have people reach out on LinkedIn, people who connect with me after I have done a presentation in their workplaces and ask if I can mentor them. So I'm a mentor from work, and then I'm a mentor in the community. And so yes, I am a mentor, and I believe mentorship is truly a critical component for your success as a woman. I'm a firm believer in not having to do things the hard way. If I can learn from someone else, why not? Why make the mistakes others have made? And so I try and do the same for those that I interact with. One of my core values is impact. I believe that people should be different as a result of interacting with me. And that could be whether it's a conversation we have over 5 minutes, over a cup of tea, or interacting with my brand on LinkedIn, on Instagram, or participating in one of the programs we run. I think that's something I take very seriously. How do I impact the people around me? And I know mentorship is a key way to do that. I think a successful relationship is one that is able to navigate time and adapt to what the mentee needs over time, right? I think that some of my mentees, how we started off and how we are today is very different. So I think for me, a successful relationship is one that's able to adapt as change happens, as people transition. I have mentees, for example, who were my employees, who are now working elsewhere. And so our mentor-mentee relationship has changed because they no longer work for me. And I think a successful relationship is one that's able to adapt. I think that's critical, so that you're not just a mentor for a short period, but you're a mentor over life. And I think another thing that I would say is a sign of a successful mentorship relationship is one where you are excited by the successes of your mentee and you celebrate those successes with them. You celebrate the milestones with them. There's this perception out there sometimes that we are our worst enemies as women. That's just so untrue. We can celebrate each other. We can celebrate the successes that we achieve. And I think a successful mentor-mentee relationship is one that is full of celebration of the different milestones that you have. And then I think another element that I would say is an indication of a successful relationship between a mentor and mentee is where the relationship kind of bleeds into different facets of life. So it's not just necessarily business related, because a person is a whole person and they have all these different facets of their life. And so if I'm able to impact someone in a positive way, and it starts off as a work relationship, but my relationship with them is then able to impact them in their personal life, I think that's also a sign of success. It shows that our relationship transcends just the kind of work that we may have started. So I think those probably are three things that for me would indicate a successful relationship. I think first of all, the idea of embracing equity needs to start at the top. It needs to be something that's taken on by the highest levels of an organization. When we have a department, for example, maybe diversity and inclusion department, and they are the ones that do everything related to diversity, and it's just the responsibility of that department, we're setting ourselves up for failure. This is something that needs to be owned at the highest levels. It needs to be something owned by the board and by the CEO and the C-suite. So I think that's the first thing for me. If we want to make sure that we are cultivating a space for young women to show up and thrive, it needs to be something that's taken seriously at the very top. We need to demystify this idea that it's a men versus women kind of campaign. Men need to be on board. Men need to understand why it's important to have their female counterparts taking up leadership roles. Men need to understand how it adds value for them as well. As long as we have this combative approach, we're not going to get far. So I think another thing I'd say for organizations, in order to cultivate that environment for the young women coming along, is to bring the men on board. So create gender awareness, help the entire organization to understand why this is important, the value that our differences bring to the table and to the benefit of the organization. I think this is critical because as long as, like I said, we have this idea that it's us versus them, we're really going to be limited. So I think maybe those are some of the quick things I would say that organizations could do that would really help them to create a playing field that allows young women to thrive. The reality is that we have a plethora of young women who are capable. All they need is the opportunity. And so we just need to give them that space to take up their space.